Hi, I'm astrologer Penny Dix and welcome to another Astrobite. And the Astrobite for today is about retrograde Venus in Aries, our planet of love, relationship, how we value ourselves. It can also represent finance, economy, money, and it's conjunct Mercury, our planet of communication. So they're both in Aries, they're both conjunct, Venus is retrograde, and Mercury, our planet of communication, thoughts, ideas, is also going retrograde, but not till Saturday, the 15th. So let's have a think about what this kind of short little aspect can mean, because sometimes these aspects can bring quite intense experiences. You see, when we have a retrograde, it gives us time to reflect, to maybe reevaluate how we feel about relationships that we are in, relationships we have been in. And it also kind of makes us reevaluate our personal values. So we may find ourselves a little bit reflective today and thinking about the past, thinking about past relationships. And it can be, it may be helpful if these feelings and thoughts come up to write them down, talk to a trusted friend. You may have unresolved feelings and emotions about someone who perhaps you've had a relationship with who is no longer in your life. And somehow perhaps the communication was cut off or was never resolved, or there was no way to bring in that sense of closure. And so with Mercury here, it's kind of suggesting if you can get into the energy of communicating how you feel about a past relationship. It can also be a current relationship that you are perhaps a bit stuck with, and you both need a little bit of time out to reflect, to just take a step back and think about where you both are, especially perhaps if it's a fairly new relationship. It can be about passion, and it's in the 5th house of the event chart, which is love affairs. Also, I think Mercury can be a bit impulsive at times because it's in the sign of Aries, and Aries is cardinal. It wants to get going. It wants to get things done and sorted. It's bold. We can be a little bit too blunt and fiery. We can feel quite emotionally wound up and charged with Mercury in Aries. And we may want to sort of say what it is and say it now. And we don't think it through properly. And we go storming ahead and message whoever it is and say, and I was thinking about when you said, and and we go into a long kind of, message about how we felt. And the other person is like, I wasn't even kind of in this kind of space in my head. I think we've all had these experiences where we rush into conversations with people that we feel we have an issue we want to resolve with them without really giving it considered thought and kind of thinking about whether is it going to be the right time for the other person, and do they actually want to have this conversation? It might feel good for us, but is it actually any good for them? So if you do get those impulsive feelings to contact someone maybe you're a little bit estranged from even, or used to be involved with, or in a current relationship which has got a little bit just out of step, check in first. Ask the other. Say, there's some things that have been coming up for me that I'd really like to address with you. Are you able to do that with me? And if they don't want to, or they're not ready, or they just perhaps never want to, you have to let it go. And you have to tell it to your journal or your best friend, assuming that's not the person that we're talking about in this. So be aware and guarded against those urgent impulses of, I need to say how I feel and I need to say it now. I think that we reevaluate our desires and values a lot with this energy, so that we reassess what it is we want, and that could be with regard to relationships, and what it is, how it is that we want that to unfold. The problem can be that because Mercury is conjunct retrograde Venus, we overthink it, intellectualize it, and are not in touch with our heart feeling, the feeling of our soul, our intuition. So it's really important with this conjunction, especially on Tuesday, today, the 11th, to think carefully before you bring anything up of importance with a loved one. Because I think sometimes we confuse things and make things more difficult. So there is miscommunication, lack of clarity. And the other thing that we can, I think, expect with a Venus retrograde in general is that we can hear or bump into past loves quite unexpectedly. We might just get a message from them or an email, something like that. And that could be in friendships if there is as I say, a friendship that has perhaps turned a bit sour. So, but just watch against it because of that Aries influence, because it can tend to make us a little bit too much. We can be too much for the other. It's like really count to 10, slow down, think before you speak, because if you're over impulsive, then I think that we live to regret it, because we might have felt better because we've got that off our chest and we just, yes, I've said it and it's understood, but don't rush into it. It's a time, more of a time for what I would call the inner reflection. Impulsive actions, whether it's with love or with money, because remember, Venus represents finance, buying luxurious goods, making big financial purchases. Don't rush into anything like that with Venus retrograde. And be aware of the themes that do come up for you today, because it may be that these themes bring up areas of your inner self, patterns, habits, ways that you have handled relationships in the past that have not been helpful to you. And so what this is giving you also is the opportunity to do it differently this time, because I think sometimes we can make the mistake with a retrograde planet. Oh, it's giving me a second chance. And yes, that's true. It does a lot of the time. But it's only going to be a second chance if both of you are ready to reflect and look at what may have turned sour in a friendship or a relationship. So let me just have another look at the chart to see what else is actually happening today, because what we do have as well is the Sun and Saturn coming up to square Uranus. Now, the Sun and Saturn are virtually conjunct, and in fact, they are conjunct tomorrow, I think it is. Yes, because I'm going to do an astrobite for that. They're conjunct tomorrow, and I'm going to do a separate astrobite about that. And of course, they're in Pisces, and they are moving into position for the full moon lunar eclipse on Friday the 14th. Uranus, remember, in Taurus, Uranus has been there for several years now. Uranus is the planet of the unexpected, of shocks, of also innovation, rebellion, freedom of speech. So along with this Venus retrograde conjunct Mercury, this is where this Uranian energy is saying, oh, go on, say it, do it, ask it, feel it. I would just say that even though you've got the energy of the sextile from Uranus to the Sun and Saturn saying, yeah, why not? Something good could come of this. Saturn is there. Saturn, I think, is saying, no, not yet. It's not the right time. Be aware of that, because it's you know, on the surface, as I said, Venus conjunct Mercury seems quite positive energy, and it can be. I think as long as you use it as a period of reflection, and journaling would be one of the best uses of this energy. But if someone gets in touch with you that you have wanted to make amends with or clear the ground, then I would say, as long as you are very mindful about how you approach it and what you say, it can go extremely well. Now, the word for the day, because as it's about, you know, retrogrades, and we've got Mercury already slowing down to go retrograde on Saturday, I thought we'd find the word reflection. Because Aristotle said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Now, I find that an interesting quote, because how often have we rushed ahead thinking, oh, it would be so cool if I could sort things out in this friendship. And we, as I said earlier, we call that person, we launch into it, we tell our story, we vent our spleen, and the other person is like, no, thank you, bad time to have called me, hello. So be mindful of that, because Uranus can push us into doing something that is a little bit out of character. Take your time. Know yourself well. If you are someone who is prone to acting impulsively, really be aware of that today. Now, someone called John Dewey said, we do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. And that is a really good way to manage today's energy. Carl Jung said, who was the Swiss psychoanalyst, your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. There's an unknown quote here, which is, sometimes you have to take a step back to see the bigger picture. Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And I've said this before, and I think we've actually had that quote before. You know, the oracle at Delphi in Greece had carved on the archway into the temple, know thyself. And our lives really are part of that process. Everything we do in life is about knowing ourselves better. Paulo Coelho, that lovely writer who wrote The Alchemist and many other very, very good books. When we strive to become better than we are, everything around us becomes better too. It's about attitude. And it's also about awareness, conscious awareness of another. And that's what I think this duality of Venus and Mercury is presenting for us today. Paul T.P. Wong said, "Time spent in self-reflection is never wasted. It is an intimate date with yourself." And that's a very good way to look at it, you know, to sit and quietly reflect. Doesn't have to be, you know, the classic kind of or archetypal idea of meditation, but to just sometimes sit and be and think and allow yourself, your thoughts to drift and to see where they take you. You know, I had a very interesting experience on Monday morning, because I'm recording this on Monday. So I'm talking about tomorrow, Tuesday, but of course it's today when you see it. I had to have an MRI for my shoulder. And I think, as I've mentioned, I'm hoping to have this stem cell therapy treatment on my shoulder for pretty bad problems in my shoulder and a lot of pain. So I had this MRI. And if you've had an MRI, you know you are put in a tube, and I was like kind of all strapped up like this. My arm really hurts. As they kind of bound me up to make sure nothing moved so they could get good images to for the orthopedic surgeon to look at what's going on inside my shoulder. Now, what was very interesting was being inside this tube for half an hour. You have the earphones on to protect you from the noise, because with an MRI you get a lot of, it sounds like a pneumatic drill. Someone is digging a hole in the road. And you have to stay perfectly still. And I stayed, as probably most people would, with my eyes closed, because if you open them, you see you're in this tube, and it's a little bit kind of like, ooh, okay. And anyway, I found myself just drifting. And even though my body was not in a comfortable position, where my mind took me was so kind of relaxing and peaceful. Do you know, I could have dropped off to sleep, which really surprised me. I don't know why I've brought that in. I think it was thinking about this self-reflection that we get with retrograde planets. Winston Churchill said, to improve is to change. To be perfect is to change often. Well, I think we all aspire to be perfect, but I think there's a danger there if we ever think we've achieved perfection. I certainly don't. And as you know, when you listen to me, I'm my worst critic. I am very harsh on myself. The last quote is an unknown quote, and it's, "Be like a mirror, absorb everything around you, and reflect back only the truth." I think that's a good place to stop. Thank you so much for joining me for this AstroBite. And please remember to like, comment and subscribe. If you haven't seen my live weekly forecast, which I did live streamed on Sunday night, it's up on my channel under live or playlists, weekly forecasts, I think it is. So check that out. And in the meantime, I wish you a lovely day, and just enjoy life and communicate sensitively is the best advice I can give you, actually, for every day. Communicate with thought and sensitivity. I will be back very soon. Bye for now. Bye.